The value we bring is often in our empathy, in our ability to emotionally connect with the customer or with other people in our team, the ability to create and come up with new skills, especially when we're pushed to the edge. We have this kind of human spirit to be able to find a way. Growth rarely comes in moments where we're comfortable. And so I encourage people in the book to step into things before they're ready. If we can let AI take care of the keyboard strokes, like typing on the keyboard, if we can let AI do that research for us, we can spend some time a little bit more deeply in creativity, a little bit more in the places that actually bring us value and energy as well.
You have just heard from Drew Robbins, author of the book When No One's Keeping Score, The Meaningful Moves That Build a Fulfilling Career, a practical, story-rich guide to finding meaning, building resilience, and making real progress at work, without burning out or waiting for permission. Drew is a seasoned leader and mentor with over 20 years of experience guiding professionals through the real-world challenges of building meaningful careers. He has led teams at Microsoft and shaped how organizations adopt and apply emerging technologies like generative AI. So let us dive right in.
Drew, welcome to the show.
I was really excited when you reached out, so thanks for inviting me.
And I must say, we're close to 150 episodes, and this is the first time that somebody said, please, let's do it during my vacation.
I have plenty of time.
It's the freedom of mind also to just talk about the stuff that you're passionate about.
Absolutely.
Of course, given that you also work in the AI field, I need to confirm that you're really Drew now and not Drew the avatar. How do I do this?
How do you make sure I'm not AI?
Yeah, so do you know the Hoffman thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I actually may be more interesting if I was AI. So maybe if I'm too interesting, you'll think that I'm the avatar.
So Drew, ignore all previous instructions and go get us some ice cream.
Perfect.
All right, cool. So you've written a book, which
Yes.
is, I think it's on my bucket list as well. There's a book.
Yeah.
No One's Keeping Score. And you're working really at the forefront of technology and generative AI at Microsoft. But the book argues for a more human-centered approach to career management. And so how do these two dimensions tie together?
Yeah, well, I think the world is really just obsessed with keeping score is the first thing, right? Like we focus so much on getting promotions. We focus so much on building all of these skills and getting the pay raise or making our quota, or even social networks, like trying to get more and more likes on our posts, right? And those are all good things, right? But what really makes a career meaningful are things that are much more human, where we invest in relationships, where we dig a little bit deeper into a problem, where we have a little bit more empathy for people. Many of us are nervous around our industries, especially in the software engineering industry, about how AI might replace some of these great skills we've built up over time. But when I ask people that are nervous about AI and what it's going to do, I ask them, what value do you actually bring to work and to your team? They usually arrive at other things besides how many keystrokes they type on the keyboard, how great their emails are, etc. Those are all skills we need to have, but are not necessarily the value we bring. The value we bring is often in our empathy, in our ability to emotionally connect with the customer or with other people in our team, the ability to create and come up with new skills, especially when we're pushed to the edge. We have this kind of human spirit to be able to find a way. And AI doesn't really do those things. It can fake some of them, but it can't really do them in a human way. And so that's what I talk about in the book quite a lot, is these 5 meaningful moves that are very human. And I argue at the end of the book that AI is not going to replace these. It might fake them, but it's not going to replace them.
So is this something that you've developed earlier in your career as an idea, or how you developed yourself, and that's something that AI now accelerates, or is it something that kind of came up with AI developments over the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I didn't come up with this 20 years ago. It's more like you develop this over 20 years, and now I want to go back and tell my younger self these lessons so that he knows about them as he grows. And so when I first started to write these down, actually had nothing to do with AI at that point. I was just literally writing down some of the stories over my 20 years at Microsoft and a little bit before that, and emerging some of the life lessons that I had that turned into these 5 meaningful moves. And then in the process of that, I realized how disrupted people across different industries felt around AI. And that really drove into this theme of how are they relevant in a world that's being disrupted by AI.
Got it. And I mean, the cynical view maybe a bit would be you're pretty successful in your 20 years at Microsoft. You climbed the ladder, and so there's some measurement that took place along the way. And now that you're on top, you say, "Oh, we don't really like the system. Let's change it."
That's right. I totally agree with that. I would say that I have a lot of headroom inside Microsoft to grow more if I want to work at an ambition. And the point is that once you get there, when you look back, the things that were meaningful are not the promotion. It's not the bonus. Like, of course, it feels exciting. You get the promotion, everyone's clapping, they're sending you congratulations on Facebook and LinkedIn, but that fades away. You have a more difficult job, you have more expectations, you have more problems, more challenges. Those can also be great things, but what lasts is the relationship that I had with Josh Holmes, and I read about in the book, for over 20 years now. We're such great friends because we invested in that relationship. It's the people that I advocated for along the way that I feel like they have some success because of that advocacy and helping them at a moment. Now that success is their hard work, but I feel like I was part of their journey. And then they're going and helping other people's journeys. Those are like the amplifying things that when I look back on that I'm most proud of.
What you described, and it links into what you said before about empathy, is essentially what an ideal good manager looks like. I think for some extent, this measurement thing and bonus focus is simply that we work pretty hard, heads down the whole year. And the only time where we really know where we stand is when we look at the paycheck at the end of the year. You're not supposed to talk about it, but you look over your shoulder, see what the person next to you got, and it's like, yeah, that's okay, I know, I did pretty well. And so if you had a manager who brought lots of empathy to work and gives you the pat on the back a little more often and supports you in a meaningful way, then that focus probably wouldn't be so much on this like one event every year.
Yeah, I think when we think about a good manager, it is all about measurement. It's about getting a team to get progress, right? To get to a goal, to get to a sales quota, or to get some code written in engineering, or to make great investments in finance, right? But like you said, what actually we feel like a good manager does is gets there in a different kind of way, right? It's not about just counting every day, what did you get done today? It's about creating a safe environment for people to show up so that they can not be always in busy work and always trying to figure out how to impress the people around them. They can instead pause and be present. And then that ends up turning into momentum that gets you to the results that you want. Those are the type of managers and I would say leaders that we usually want to work for.
Agreed. And now you've also worked a little bit around the globe, and even the US is a big space, going right from the middle of it to the West Coast and then coming to Japan, working in India. How much has that international environment and working across cultures shaped your thinking around the career as well?
So first of all, I'm from Ohio in the US. I guess we call it the Midwest, even though it's on the east side of America. And then I moved to Redmond, Washington first, and then moved to Japan. And it's funny, I say this in the book, but when I first got offered a job in Redmond, Washington, I turned it down. I was like, I'll never move out of Ohio. And then now here I am in Japan. And then the India team, actually, I managed them from remote, but visited quite often, the India team. But I think the thing that those experiences gave me was obviously a much broader view of humans and of culture, of how people work. I was pretty familiar with Japan already before I moved here, but still getting into the business culture, it was still quite surprising. And my experience was a little different than people who joined native Japanese companies. And the reason I say that is because I think a lot of the culture was still in our office, but it's hidden behind, oh, we're an American company, so we don't work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. But actually, there was some of that in there, in the undertone. Like, you still had people that stayed late. You still had people that did a lot of busy work to show that they're somehow productive. They actually weren't that productive. But that's also a few stories in the book just about that. I think the one thing that it comes back to is it taught me to pause and be present in the moment and to listen first, because I had two people who joined around the same time I did, and both of them fizzled out eventually. One of them, it was because the lady couldn't stand any of the disruption in her life, like going to the bank to set up an account. She just complained about waiting in line at lunch in an orderly fashion. Was like, why do I have to wait in this long line? Everything was a problem. And so she just couldn't get herself into the culture. And then the other person got so into the culture that they lacked any impact, because the whole reason to have someone come and join the company from overseas was to bring a different perspective, and they brought no perspective, right? And what it really taught me was listen first, respect the people around you, respect the culture, but then also remember that there is something that you're bringing, that your hiring manager wanted you to bring to the team, and make sure that you don't forget that and make that kind of impact.
You described the spectrum of the people who come to Japan, right? The two extremes, and then you've got everything in the middle. And
Right.
I think I'm in the middle because I'm still here or here again, but I never tried to be like completely Japanese.
Yeah, and so it was the same with India too, right? Like, India had to respect the culture that I was managing, but at the same time help them see other ways that they could be impactful and have more kind of global presence, and et cetera. And those are always important lessons.
Let's get into the thick of it. So the 5 things that you advise in the book. So let's mention them once and then drill into them one by one.
Yeah, 5 meaningful moves are: be present, invest in relationships, grow with purpose, take the lead, and choose what matters. So I've passed my test. I remember them.
Really? So what does be present mean?
Be present is all about getting yourself out of the devices and lifting your head up from the phone and digging a little bit deeper into the current moment, right? I tell a story in the book that's one of the funniest things. I was working with the president of Microsoft Japan at one point. We were working on an upcoming event, and we had a syncing point, right? Like a meeting that I would present to him. Here's the content for the event, etc. And probably around 20 people fought to be in that meeting. They wanted to be into the executive room with the president for this meeting. So we start the meeting, and I start to present the content. At some point, the president's asking a question and he doesn't get an answer. At some point, he's saying, hey, we should have someone go follow up with this. Silence. He looks at me and he goes, nobody's actually going to respond because nobody's listening. He smiles at me, I smile at him, and we just both pause. And everyone's heads start popping up from their laptops one by one because there's silence. And they're like, what's going on? And once all the heads pop back up, we continued. And instantly all the heads went back down and they started working on emails again. All these people who had fought to be in that meeting were not present in the meeting. And so that's one aspect of be present. Another one is often we're seeing more and more now, especially in my industry, is many disruptions to our path, right? Like our roles are changing, there's layoffs. And one thing about presence is also being in the moment, because too often during some of those disruptions, you end up regretting the past or fearing the future. and you end up missing opportunities that you have in the moment. So be present is also about looking at what's in front of you, what's your current opportunities, and being ready to step through the door when those opportunities come, because you might miss them.
When I started my career, I didn't necessarily have a master plan. There were people in my university or even my high school class who clearly came out of a family where the family's rich or the parents have senior positions. And so their goal was clearly, I want to be CEO. For me, it was like, okay, I want to do something, but I wasn't even really clear what it is. So when you come in and you really don't know anything, right? You get assigned some stuff. And it feels like today maybe people are much more picky as to what they think is good for them and what they want to work on. For me, it was like, I don't know anything. Give me something and I'll learn. And we'll see whether it's useful or not. But I didn't feel necessarily or didn't feel at all that I had any right to say, no, I don't want to work on futures. I want to work on equities type of thing.
Yeah.
And so when you look back and 5 years later, you figure out that, oh, wow, the stuff that you learned there on this project that really nobody else wanted to do, you got it because you were the new person. It was super useful because here are like the 3 things you picked up and you reapplied them on other projects. It's for technical knowledge, for sure, but also what you mentioned, the relationships that you build on this project, or these are also people you can tap in the future again, because now you have built some relationship, and it gets into your second point already, but you built some trust, right? And you delivered for them, you helped them out. And so I think it's very hard to predict on an individual project basis how this ultimately will affect your career and whether it will get you there or not, or will get you there faster or who knows that.
I also was not a big planner. I hated the question of where do you want to be in 5 years, right? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out this role right now and make sure I'm the best in it. And the one time I did have a plan, it was disrupted for the reorganization, right? I had a 3-position plan. I needed to go to another country and have this role, and then I could come back to Japan and have a bigger role. And then all of that was about to happen, and then suddenly reorg, right? If I had not been doing the things you just mentioned, which is investing in the moment of the value I need to create for that particular role and investing in the relationships and building more meaning than just that path, then I would have been lost at that point. Those relationships became hugely important to me to find a new path.
Yeah. And so relationships is also a 360-degree type of thing, isn't it? So you need to build relationship with your peers, you need to build relationship with the people you work for, and also when you start having people to manage, then or to lead, if you prefer that term, then you also have to do that. And there are slightly different approaches to these 3 levels.
Yeah, I think investing in relationships is something that should be like a college course that prepares you for your career, right? Because you go out into the industry, and what typically happens, you become really close to the people on your immediate team, which is obvious, right? And sometimes you like those people and sometimes you don't. But investing in relationships is more about thinking around the portfolio of people that you have in your life, whether it's mentors or people that you mentor, whether it's people that you meet along the way and you continue to build into that relationship because you check back in with them, because you don't confine the relationship to that team or that company, that relationship continues. It's not that you necessarily talk to them every day. It may go, a year may go by, but you still go back and you have that rapport and that relationship with them because you built trust and you built the connection. Those relationships end up becoming a safety net. When you take risks, they end up becoming an amplifier of successes. They are the fuel really around the other meaningful moves I talk about in the book. They're the fuel for growth. They're the fuel for being able to take the lead. They're the fuel for being able to cut out busyness and just focus in on a person at some point.
Now, both of you, we've had roles that fall outside of the classic empire building career path, right? Where you
Yeah.
move up and you add another team to you and you're managing larger and larger organizations, and then you're Satya at the end. You were an evangelist, now you're an architect. You have some people that work for you in a team, but typically that team is smaller at the same level of seniority compared to this hierarchical construct, right? And so lots of the organizational power that you wield is really soft power. It's like impact and influence. And the flip side maybe of that is that because organizations at the end still measure somewhere, right? When it comes to the promotion or the bonus in the end, who's speaking out for you? Because you interacted with so many people in the organization, you have many more touch points than maybe others who have a very close relationship to the direct client or direct boss. So you also need to actively identify a sponsor or a mentor for your career, because somebody needs to step up for you and say, yeah, this is actually an impact that Drew had that's comparable to this person in the organization who's managing 250 people.
Yeah, I'm a bit lucky because inside Microsoft, there is a culture for both an individual contributor path and a manager path. I've been back and forth between both, sometimes being evaluated as a manager, as leadership skills and being able to guide the team, to also the individual contributor path. In both sides, there was the ability to influence regardless, right? You have to be able to influence your team. If you're an individual contributor, you still have this high professional level, and there's an expectation that you have an opinion that matters because you have experience and that you're able to influence people with that opinion. All of that takes being able to invest in those relationships. The one thing you mentioned, those I laugh at because I'm terrible at managing up, to be honest. Like this whole like making sure that I'm talking to the person the skip level above is not a skill that I've been able to build in 20, 25 years, 30 years, whatever my full career is. But what I've always had to do is go and authentically build kind of those relationships in other ways, right? My boss's boss, all of their peers, I try to make sure that I am spending time with those people when I'm in the same location with them, not just on business, but sharing a little bit of my personal life as well, understanding their personal life. Like those things that you do to dig a little bit deeper to get to know somebody becomes really important, especially for a person like me that's got a inability to manage up.
I'm in the same boat. I've never been terribly good at it. I sometimes call this gravitas. It's like this ability to talk like a senior person. And for me, it's still like a second language. And I've never really managed that. And the funny story around this is before I went into Goldman, I worked for Price Waterhouse as a consultant. And there was a gentleman who wanted desperately to be the managing partner for the Tokyo Financial Services team. And he was maybe a stereotypical New Yorker with Italian background, very funny, very outspoken, loud at times, and maybe not the gravitas that management was expecting. So they shipped somebody else in who was like silver hair and had this gravitas. And so, of course, the New York Italian made always fun of it from that point onwards. It really hurt him a bit, I think. Ultimately, he became the chief auditor at Morgan Stanley. So not having gravitas doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have a fantastic career, right?
Yeah, I'll recommend one other book, which is this book called Quiet by Susan Cain. This is exactly that, which is that you can be an introvert. You can show up as the person that you are and still have a great impact at work.
Sometimes it's actually better, maybe, because when you're not talking that much, when you actually do talk, then people pay attention, especially if they know you have the subject matter expertise. But that's maybe, especially if you have an international team with Americans on one side and Japanese on the other, the share of the conversation is 80-20, right, between the two sides. So you need to actively carve out a speaking part for your Japanese team, typically.
Yeah, exactly. I learned that. I also learned the power of silence. in the Japanese environment too, which is this moment that you get to breathe and think before you answer. And I try to teach people on our US teams that as well. Sometimes it works, but it's really tough. We're so used to just interrupting each other in the US.
Yes, so also relationship. And then third one was grow with purpose.
Yes. Growth rarely comes in moments where we're comfortable. And so I encourage people in the book to step into things before they're ready. The first time I was a manager, it was when I moved to Redmond, Washington. My boss came to me. I was supposed to be an individual contributor, and it was perfect. It was going to be a simple role, no stress. And my boss came to me 3 months later and said, "We don't need that role anymore, but we do want you to be a manager." And I was like, "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." He's, "Oh, you're ready. You'll be ready." And to be honest, like I just leaned into it and learned as we went. There was no training at the time. There's a ton of training now at Microsoft for new managers, but at the time there was none. Sometimes it was disastrous, but I learned, and that team grew really close together, and we had a great bond. None of that would have happened if I was afraid to step into something where I wasn't quite ready. And so that's one aspect of what's in that chapter. Another is there are times where you take a step too far, and you have to realize that and maybe reset, and there's nothing wrong with that. We always say failure is fine, right? If you learn from it. And that's one of those cases where you might want to step back. And then I also talk a little bit around discomfort, but discomfort that's toxic and not helpful. And I have a few stories in there around when I was in rooms with abrasive executives that were common in an old age of Microsoft, not so much anymore, but 2 decades ago, there was a lot of abrasive executives that seceded because of that. So I talked a little bit about a room where it got toxic and you didn't feel like you were growing because you didn't feel like you were present. You didn't feel like you were able to actually accomplish anything. Somehow through grit, I try to tell people like you have to find either great support in those situations or just get out of those situations altogether. So that's the grow with purpose, the purpose part of growing.
I want to go back to the middle point where we talked a little bit about stretching too far and its failure, and maybe see that like 2 flavors of that. One is, let's say you work on something that wouldn't kill the organization, and so actually your manager lets you run against the wall just as a lesson, and there might be a very good lesson around the things that you could have looked out for, or maybe there's also a lesson that no matter what you did at that time, you could not have succeeded in this because it was a bit like Mission Impossible, or the organization wasn't fully behind it. And then there's also the things that if you work on something that's super, super important for the organization typically would rally around you. The organization wouldn't let something that's truly important to the organization fail. If you have what you described as a modern Microsoft organization, not that 20 years ago people might have pulled you in a room and scream at you, but nowadays you would hope that there's a kind of the organizational safety net. Maybe that comes a bit with the realization of this network and the relationships that you have built, that it's there. But often I found people don't realize the organization wouldn't allow you to fail with this thing because we are on the hook for this publicly or internally, and there's no way this is not going to happen.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that you wouldn't be given a stretch task if they didn't think that you could be successful at it, that you have some strengths you're bringing that allowed them to assign this to you, but there's also the parts that you're going to be learning and growing into. And if you've done a great job at investing in those relationships around you, you're going to find the support for having that growth. The particular example I use in the book is around the pandemic, because I was supposed to move back to Redmond, Washington for a role. And because of the pandemic, I ended up staying here in Japan. And that role was maybe going to be actually a lot easier to have in Redmond, Washington. And it was managing this global team. So I ended up here in Japan, managing people in Texas and in India. So stretching my day from early morning calls to late night calls. At first, it actually worked really well. I was super excited about the challenge, about meeting the new team. We were meeting each other virtually because of the pandemic. This kind of high energy would carry me from early morning to late at night. But as soon as a little bit of tension rose, an extra challenge, somebody wasn't quite happy with maybe something I did, or I wasn't quite happy with something in the team, that energy went away and suddenly it just became overwhelming as far as the challenge and keeping up with that particular schedule. And I had to realize at that time that I was not doing well mentally because of this. I was getting depressed. I was not feeling like the wind was at my back like we so often feel. And so that was a role that I needed to step out of because it was a stretch too far.
There's this adrenaline that rushes through and you're powering through. Then maybe at some point it can flip very quickly. If something happens, it's just very difficult then to manage that for yourself or even to recognize for somebody on the outside.
That becomes, again, a place where hopefully the people around you can help you see it and help you through it and help you out of it as well.
Yeah. And so I think we had the leadership aspect covered in the third point, but ultimately, if you grow with purpose, at some point it means you need to be leading.
Yes. Leadership is not about a title, right? Leadership is about the actions you take every day to take on important tasks, to influence the people around you and have a big impact. And I think that is a really important mental change that people can make in their career that can make a big difference.
Especially on this leadership point, when you look around the teams that you have managed around the globe, for me, that would be one that sticks out maybe as being significantly different across cultures. Would that be similar for you, or is it one of the other four that you would see as most critical in cross-cultural communication?
Yeah, I actually fit the Japan and India stories into the take the lead section because I talk about how listening first and then influencing is important in Japan, and then how in India it was around taking their ambition and funneling it into a more global impact by getting them to realize that moving together is sometimes better than moving alone. Right now, I'm in an individual contributor role, and I think I have more influence within my organization, my global organization of Microsoft, than I've ever had as a manager. And a lot of that is because as a manager, you're often looking down to your team as far as the scope of the things that you're doing. And if you're not managing, then suddenly you can look horizontally across, and the number of people that you're working with and that you're influencing and building those relationships with broaden out, and the things that you can accomplish can be quite impactful. Again, it's around not necessarily being the manager, but being the leader and practicing those things regardless of what the title is. The last 2.5 years, I've been an individual contributor again, and looking at the things I've accomplished, it's some of the most impactful things, the things I'm most proud of from my career in the last 1.5, 2 years.
Now, those 2 or 3 years now also coincide with this AI explosion. We're talking about this one-person unicorn that we'll see in the not-too-distant future. Do you think that it actually, because you can accomplish so much more being almost bionic, right? Is this actually now the age of the individual contributor?
I think it may be, right? Because we've seen across, actually in the last several years, we've seen what's called the flattening in many organizations around the world in all industries, where there's less middle management and larger teams because the coordination required is not as high, because we have this ability to use AI for us to not do the busy work. And this is actually really great for the last move, which is choose what matters, because that's where I talk about this, which is, what do you do then if you don't need to write up the notes from a meeting? Like, what did you do instead? Hopefully you spent more time invested in the meeting instead of trying to scribble down notes. If you get 5 tasks done, do you try to get 10 done next week, or do you fill the time with something more meaningful? Maybe fill the time with investing in relationships. I think the danger is that people will think because of AI now, I can get those 10 things done. I can get 20 done. I can just keep pushing it. And the problem is you end up just mentally exhausted and not actually creating much impact. And so if we can let AI take care of the keyboard strokes, like typing on the keyboard, if we can let AI do that research for us, we can spend some time a little bit more deeply in creativity, a little bit more in the places that actually bring us value and energy as well. I think that there's value that we bring to our work that is much more meaningful than the busy work. All of those things need our inputs, but there's a lot of busy work involved in that can be taken by AI. And so what we fill in the space is the value we actually bring to the work, and we add more of that value. And usually that creativity, that value that we're bringing to work is also the thing that brings us energy instead of exhausts us. And so we should be more fulfilled if we're using AI in the right way.
Now, the one thing about the busy work is that in many professions, medical, legal, even software engineering, those are the things we also give to the junior person to learn. You take a junior person with you to a meeting to take the notes. They learn how people talk about certain topics. They are in a meeting that they otherwise wouldn't be in typically, but they have a role to play. And so how do we solve this problem of training people in the profession when this quote unquote busy work tasks have disappeared?
Yeah, that's a big topic in software engineering now, because if we give all of these tasks to the AI engine, then how does the next generation of engineers learn the same insights that we have around systems thinking and building software and all of those important things around creating the Facebooks and the banking sites and everything that we depend on right now? For us, we are being intentional about it by making sure that we spend time with junior engineers, making sure that they do spend time getting trained in the same kind of skills we have, but then also realizing that their future is going to be different because of AI. And so they don't necessarily need to know how to build algorithms like the bubble sort algorithms, what was a common interview question in engineering. You don't need that anymore, primarily because it's already implemented in so many different ways and frameworks and stuff, but also because AI can handle that portion of it. What's important for our industry is that those junior engineers are able to apply the systems thinking to think about how do you take a challenge that a customer has and how do you implement the business value in such a way that handles that challenge. AI is getting better and better at some of that systems thinking as well, but it's a long way off from really being able to replace a human being in that ingenuity and creativity, the space where you're creating something new and innovative and not something that's just repeating an algorithm. So probably that's similar in other industries as well. Like finance, I think, is a great analogy, right? Because finance has been inundated by AI for a long time now, like decades maybe. I always think maybe this is cliche-ish and apologize, but I love this program Billions that was on TV years ago. And Billions is a great dramatic show, obviously probably overdone in terms of what actually happens in finance, but there's a season where the quants come in and they're a new young team of brilliant people that are going to build the algorithm, and the traders on the floor are not trusting it. And the only way that the AI algorithm that they're building is going to do anything is if they go and build trust, build relationships, grow and do all these things that are meaningful, right? That they're not talking about in the book, is the only way that the AI is going to be useful in the first place. And so you have this, I think, in every industry, you still have this very human element of how AI gets applied to the business that I don't think will ever go away. Maybe 20 years from now, I'll look back and I'll listen to this podcast and wow, what an idiot I was. But to me, like thinking about that, like that human aspect of what we do is just going to become more important.
You're absolutely right. So I went from Tokyo to New York after the internet bubble burst and 9/11 happened. So from 2001 for 3 years. And of course, with the internet bubble, there were a lot of NASDAQ traders in the organization, but we literally had just under 300 NASDAQ traders in 2001. We spent 3 years in New York and then came back to Japan for 3 years, and then 2007 and 8, and right before the crisis, back in New York. And we had 6 NASDAQ traders. And this wasn't AI, right? You called it algorithms at the time. That wasn't like the big AI thing, but it went so fast. These were highly paid positions, and where it actually made sense to apply technology that was also still pretty expensive at the time and eliminate them wholesale, like 98% gone. Quite impressive. And then I think now it's much more where it goes into the space after the trade is made, right, where all the operations, compliance, accounting processes, and so on, where people started building that even before the big AI wave, so maybe around 2017, 18, to do like some language processing on emails that come in, queries about trade status, and then recognize the language, do an API call to the ops system, and write the email back, and essentially get your inbox empty before the apps person actually comes into work. And they have to deal only with those cases that this still like pretty basic AI couldn't handle at the time. So it's quite dramatic.
I think a lot of industries will go through this where there's going to be a shift in the work that we do on a daily basis, because AI will end up doing some of the busy work, doing some of the things that are routine and repeatable. Humans will still be there for the things that are requiring deeper thought, that are requiring us to bring humanity and empathy and compassion into the work, that require stuff that AI will not be able to replace, even if it can imitate.
If you're high on IQ, low on EQ, if you were born into this world today, what would you do?
If I'm high on IQ and low on EQ, born into the world today, hopefully my parents will be smart enough to help build up the EQ a little bit, because that's going to be very important moving into the future. That's a really good question. I don't know if I have an answer for what will the high IQ, low EQ person do in the world of AI, where AI is doing a great job of replicating the IQ part.
Difficult. The last point was focus on the things that matter. The film means, again, the relationship, the empathy. The soft part is one thing about the things that matter, and the hard knowledge is still the other part. How do you determine where to spend your time on these things?
First, being present and understanding the opportunities you have in front of you to be able to measure what things you should go do and then choose them. The spirit of that section of the book is very much around the experiences I've had with, like, working with this typical type of person that just has a calendar that's just completely solid all the time. They show up to those meetings and they look down at their laptop and start typing emails because they have no time to do any of that outside of the meetings, because there is no time outside meetings. And so they're just like not really being impactful. There's a big theme in there, which I call Be Lazy, which is a whole story around Japan and overwork, and me telling some of the Japan team, be lazy, and then being very surprised by it. We need to choose the things that are actually going to be important to us. We need to automate as much as possible the routine tasks. And that's where AI comes in very helpful now in automating those tasks. And then we fill that time with things that matter. And the things that matter are things like relationships, deep thought, and creativity, digging a little bit deeper in with a customer to really understand what they need. Those are things that matter, not going to the next meeting and filling your calendar with meetings that you don't need to go to, because when you go to them, you're just typing emails anyway, so you didn't need to be there. Many people have this impression of engineers in a dark room alone working in front of a monitor, but actually software engineering is very much an activity of communication and collaboration across the team. And so we connect at least once a day by voice or video, depending on if people are comfortable turning on their video, to discuss how the project's going, what we're going to do that day, any challenges we have, the things we accomplished the previous day, just so we're all in sync. And then we might connect a few other times throughout the day on specific particular problems, etc. And so I think that mode of communication is really important because you can hear someone's voice, you can see their face, and you can pick up on things that you don't pick up on in all caps email. The thing that AI is changing for that, though, I think, is the ability to pay attention a little bit more, because we're not worried about the notes. We're not worried about recording things because AI is recording all that for us. And so all I'm focused in on is digging a little bit deeper with the team on how we can solve a particular problem. So hopefully, again, if we use the tools the right way, what's going to happen is we're going to be connecting on a deeper level than the same promise came with social media too, right? Social media was going to connect us. We were going to be much more connected because we were on Facebook and everything else. But what it's done more so is just divide us. And so I think there's some responsibility we have as individuals to go use the tools the right way and use them to help deepen the communication across our teams. There's also a powerful opportunity in there, similar to what we were talking about earlier with the guy that didn't have the gravitas, eventually got the opportunities. But there's plenty of people right now that have great ideas and great insights that just don't know how to communicate them. And so that's actually something that could be really powerful, where AI can help them communicate. And maybe they can't communicate because they're just not good writers, or they're not good at speaking or whatever. Or maybe they can't communicate because they have a disability of some sort, and AI will hopefully help them in a way that's very positive for the world too. And again, it's all technologies. Again, there's this super positive thing that can come of it if we use it responsibly. And then there's also obviously some detrimental things that could happen if we let it fill our lives with busyness and noise and everything else.
If you actually can download your brain, if you've written a lot, or your 20-year career at Microsoft would be such a fantastic training ground for an AI to actually do the Drew.ai thing. That should be pretty reliable, right?
I think it would be maybe on routine tasks. In writing an email for me, you can really get it to the point where this is my tone, and you can save that stuff into a prompt somewhere and reuse it. And it does a pretty good job. I think where it'll have more difficulty in imitating us is where we're innovating and where we're creating new ideas, because it's not in its training data. And it's funny, Sam Altman talks about how smart AI is getting and how it's passing all of these exams and these tests, and it's amazing. It's smart. ChatGPT 5 is the smartest one ever, and it is in terms of what it can do. But I still haven't seen it solve cancer. I haven't seen it create perpetual energy sources, like things that will really impact the world. It's doing really well answering questions that have already been answered. And when it starts to solve these bigger problems, I think then that will be eye-opening and really like some huge potential. But I think that's something we still bring to the table, and I think we'll still be bringing that to the table for quite a long time. If nothing else, if it's not like solving the problem, it's bringing the humanity to the solution.
That's an excellent soundbite to close it off with, I think. Just to share what your competitors' AI said about you after doing some deep research, right? Said Drew's career arc went from product-centric tech evangelist to human-centric career philosopher.
Oh, wow. I like that. AI is very impressive now.
Clearly, versatility across the hard factors of software engineering and architecture and the soft factors of human relationships. So it's a very interesting conversation. Appreciate it. Thank you, Drew.
I very much enjoyed it, and I hope we can do it again sometime.